Better Late Than Never Video Games presents a review of Fortnite Save the World, written and narrated by Ryan Bloom. It was originally published on BLTN.net on May 21st, 2021. Pull up a chair, dear reader, and let me tell you a sad tale. I'm not sure of all the details myself, but I'm sure enough of what matters. And if nothing else, it will offer me some small absolution. This is about the time I spent saving the world. Fortnite undoubtedly needs no introduction at this point, with hundreds of millions of players globally. Whether you love it or hate it, it has become a cultural touchstone that few games can attest to. And to some degree, it was, and is, the product of right place, right time, pure luck. Something the splinter of a development team tossed together in a couple of months to bite off success from an up-and-coming series of games. It not only exploded in popularity, but Fortnite became the defining name in the Battle Royale genre. In some small way, it may have even saved Epic Games as a company. That's Battle Royale, though. Fortnite started as a different project entirely. One that was eventually given the subtitle of Save the World, abbreviated by the community as STW. After the departure of founding father Cliff Bleszinski, the sale of Gears of War to Microsoft, and the total failure of their new multiplayer shooter Paragon, Fortnite Save the World was aimed as a shifting in priorities. An ambitious co-op multiplayer building game with a story about a mysterious zombie invasion unlike anything on the market at the time. Cartoony and colorful, a new twist on classic ideas. Something I have a distinct memory of is when a developer from Epic went on Giant Bomb to demo an early build of Fortnite in July of 2017. I seem to recall him talking about how he'd been working on the game for 5 years, and probably had another 5 years ahead of him. The game had just barely entered public early access, and already this man was sounding sick of it. Maybe I was reading too much into things, but the wariness in which he described the long road ahead of Fortnite spoke loudly enough. A joking tone only covers so much. It's likely that video went up within mere days of Epic beginning development on Fortnite Battle Royale. Rewatching Giant Bomb's video on Fortnite, the developer from Epic never mentions 5 years of anything, but it must have been on a preview somewhere because it became a defining moment for me that colored how I viewed all of Fortnite. Almost immediately, it felt like Battle Royale became the central focus of development. From the outside looking in, I couldn't really blame Epic for shifting focus away from Save the World. If they spent 5 years on an albatross that was struggling to justify its existence, they'd obviously want to recoup that loss. They followed the money, and one has to assume that the Battle Royale part of Fortnite made orders of magnitude more money than Save the World ever would. This wasn't new. Save the World was a famously troubled game. The 5-year development I remember being described on Giant Bomb was not a badge of honor. It was an indication of its journey through development hell. I started playing Fortnite not long after buying my PlayStation 4 Pro in late 2017. The Battle Royale was only a few months old and, most importantly, free. I needed games for my new console, so I downloaded it and gave it a look. Fortnite was okay, but more than a little confusing, thanks to a hyper-complicated building component where you harvest materials like stone or wood and can use them to generate floors, walls, and ramps. I always kept one eye on Battle Royale, curious about the lore it was building up, but I repeatedly bounced off the game every few months due to its difficulty. It was interesting to poke at, but not a deeply penetrative experience. changed 2 years later when Battle Royale relaunched with Chapter 2. It overlapped with a Star Wars brand deal that brought lightsabers into the game. Lightsabers are where Fortnite finally clicked with me. It provided an inexperienced player like myself with a way to easily slash down those aggravating player structures while also blocking most, but not all, of weapons fire. Longtime Fortnite players hated lightsabers for disrupting their comfort zones, but it became my inflection point, alongside the launch of the Team Rumble mode. Rumbles did away with the stress of the one-and-done Battle Royale gameplay and dropped you into a huge team deathmatch where the goal is to simply hit a kill count. It was low stakes, deeply chaotic, and really helped demystify a great deal of Battle Royale systems. With those two elements combined, I was finally starting to understand the game, and as a result, I began to play more regularly. I played enough that a friend eventually started playing with me. I'd help him complete challenges on his battle pass, and eventually bought a battle pass for myself. And we kept playing and playing and playing, up to 12 hours a week, until he eventually suggested we could also start playing the Save the World campaign together. This friend even went so far as to send me $25 for Christmas that year to buy the game on discount. Epic originally wanted to charge a premium to play Save the World only in early access. The plan was that the game would eventually exit early access and then become free to play, just like Battle Royale. When you bought into Save the World's early access, you'd receive a special Founders Pack that included free daily rewards and exclusive gear. There were multiple tiers of Founder to buy into, with greater and greater rewards tied to the amount of money you were willing to spend. This would eventually change, but that was par for the course for Save the World. The Save the World I booted into in early 2020 wasn't the same campaign that originally launched in 2017. Part of the game's bumpy development included Epic basically ripping out and replacing huge swaths of gameplay systems contained within Save the World sometime after the launch of Fortnite Battle Royale. How perks are earned and equipped, how weapons function, even the structure of missions themselves was basically rebuilt from scratch. Characters like Ramirez, originally the star of Fortnite, got pushed out of the spotlight during this renovation. This new campaign still contained many similar ideas, but was a completely different take on them. Really, just about the only thing left untouched was the game's art assets. I suppose before we progress any further, it would be worth describing what you even do in Fortnite Save the World. The most top-level, simplified explanation is that Save the World is a tower defense game. Mindless creatures shuffle down a road and you have to build traps and sentries around their pathway to kill them before they reach the thing you're trying to defend. But in Save the World, there is no pathway except for the one that you yourself create. Most rounds begin with you starting in the middle of a city or out in the wilderness where you're given an objective to protect and a set of rules on how to protect it.
The only way we're going to retrieve all of the data is to shoot the balloon down as soon as possible. So bring down that balloon, download that data, and get ready to move. The balloon has landed. Defend that data.
Everything else you have to build for yourself. Walls to safeguard the objective, pathways to direct monsters, and traps to attach to various surfaces you've created. It's a much more free-form system than most tower defense games of yore. Laid over the top of that is a class system with 4 classes. Soldiers are good with guns, ninjas are highly mobile, constructors have perks for building, and lastly you have outlanders, which are good at scavenging resources. That's easy enough to digest, but the rest of Save the World is anything but comprehensible. Since it was ultimately born to be free to play, a lot of Save the World systems are probably more familiar to someone who's played a lot of mobile games. There's a big emphasis on collecting people and gear, and every single thing you collect can be upgraded or have perks attached to it, to the point of excess. playable heroes, non-playable defenders, equipable survivors, melee weapons, guns, traps, even account features and sub-campaigns themselves can have different types of enhancements applied to them via experience points, research points, or some other type of currency. You'll also find that different tiers of upgrades can take different types of resources. Not counting the raw crafting materials used to create everything, there's at least 30 different kinds of currency in Save the World for upgrading people, abilities, and equipment. To a beginner, it is beyond daunting, and a deeply layered labyrinthine menu system doesn't help matters either. And that's also before you get into Fortnite's balance and meta. What classes are the best? What weapons best suit which heroes? Which perk loadouts should you go with? How do you build the most efficient structure, and what structures are best for which mission types? What environments in which biomes give you which building materials? Save the World does the bare minimum to ease you into these systems, but for the most part they represent an imposing learning curve surrounding the core gameplay. I felt more lucky to have a friend who was already familiar with Save the World that could chaperone me through the do's and don'ts. All told, it took me probably close to 9 months to wrap my head around everything and start feeling comfortable doing solo missions. Because of how overstuffed it can feel, it's hard for me to grasp whether or not Save the World is actually a fun game to play. This isn't really the same kind of adrenaline-pumping experience you'd get with something like Doom 2016 or even Epic's old Gears of War games. The zombie-like husks you fight in this game are about as smart and as agile as they look, so there aren't really a lot of fast-paced moments of action or excitement. This is a game more about the satisfaction of planning a good build and watching monsters churn through your well-oiled death machine. For me, the fewer times I have to raise my weapon, the better. Optimal builds are the ones where I can be totally passive and let the grinder below me do all the work. But that becomes increasingly impossible the higher in difficulty you get. That might just be me, though. Depending on how good you are at construction, how many materials you have, and how you've built out your class, you'll probably have to go down and get your hands dirty in the trenches eventually. Save the World is a game that's really only as passive as you want it to be, and I've definitely been in missions that could get pretty intense, just not in the same way you'd get from more traditionally paced shooters. Save the World is a game built to last you hundreds of hours by design. Most of that will be repeating the same 15 mission types, give or take, across different biomes, environment types, and difficulties, and most of those involve a lot of the same actions of gathering, building, and then ultimately defending against the same 10 monster types. Fortnite does try and shake things up with various modifiers. You might play 2 different Fight the Storm missions back to back, but one could have the husks explode into corrosive pools of acid after they die, whereas another might have berserker husks that fly into a rage once they reach critical health. That eventually begins to mix with elemental variants too, like electric husks that sap your ability meter, or fire husks that can cause extended damage over time. Maps themselves are semi-randomized as well, with each environment having multiple variants. Even if you pick the same city mission multiple times in a row, you aren't likely to get the same city map each time. Basically, they do everything they can to make a modest amount of content feel fresh and different every time you play, but there's also no hiding the core repetition. What quickly became the #1 draw for me was, surprisingly, Fortnite's characters. The number of real, honest cutscenes in Save the World can be counted on one hand, with most of the plot dished out through voiced radio chatter with your home base.
I booked myself a meeting, but really there's no meeting. I'm just staring into space in my room.
The announcements microphone is on. We all heard that.
That song has an unreliable narrator because I'm very hard at work going through the, mailbag. Huh? I'm going through the home base mailbag, see? I'm not hiding from my responsibilities.
Think of it like a podcast or a radio play that you listen to as you complete missions. Though mission objectives themselves never change, A quest given for the game's story might see you putting tinfoil hats on scarecrows or dismantling grandfather clocks so that another character has parts to build a robot lawyer. Mostly that involves finding a specific object in the map and clicking on it to increment a quest counter, but your reward is the next piece of dialogue, nearly all of which are worth their weight in gold.
I know we're all worried, but I'm sure Crackshot is fine. Let's just find the ransom note. Or, more realistically, the torn shreds of a ransom note. We all know how things work here.
I think I found part of the note. Oh no, we have a problem.
What did you find? What's it say?
It says "ka" and sometimes like "sa."
Dennis, did you just find the letter C?
Yeah, but I don't know if it was cut out of a magazine for the ransom note or it's just a piece of a different magazine.
Oh, yeah, that's gonna be a problem.
Is anyone else just finding a lot of L's?
No. Lucky.
I'm up to 15. Is that a lot for a ransom note?
Maybe it's like a ransom acrostic.
Spelling out everyone's favourite word, 15 L's.
Right. So you're thinking it's more of a ransom limerick?
No, I am not.
It all comes down to the personalities and how they play off of each other. Save the World is not a game that takes itself very seriously. It may be the apocalypse, but everyone is trying to make the best of it in their own weird ways. One moment, it's a fast food fry cook and a robot bantering about the Mandela effect and how that reflects on vintage cereal brands, and the next moment, you're listening to an undead ghost pirate lament about how he was considered one of the most incompetent swashbucklers to ever live.
Blakebeard, I understand you're concerned about your pirating career, particularly in comparison to other noted pirates.
Yeah.
Good Lord, where's your face?
I mostly lost track.
Thanks for the advance warning, Ray.
It seemed rude to bring it up.
You absolutely made the right choice. I love watching everyone I ever meet process the horror of my missing face in real time.
Sorry?
That was not sarcasm, or no one.
It is a delight to hear every time, even as Fortnite's core narrative struggles with issues of consistency. I may not have always understood where Fortnite's story was going, but I was always interested in hearing what these characters had to say next, all the way up to the end some 200 plus hours later. Which becomes the number one major problem I have, because Save the World doesn't end, actually. As the Battle Royale portion of Fortnite began to receive the lion's share of attention and profit, updates on Save the World gradually began to slow down and shrink in scope. Take Blockbuster, a Save the World limited event that launched alongside Season 4 of the Battle Royale. After a meteor crashes near home base, Fortnite's heroes investigate the appearance of brand new Terminator-esque chrome husks. As of this writing, it is the closest the two halves of Fortnite have ever come to directly crossing over, after an equally mysterious meteor also left a crater on the Battle Royale island. Though Blockbuster is only meant to be a side story, it is nearly as long as one of the main campaign chapters, totaling in 39 individual quests. By comparison, many later Save the World events are lucky to contain even 8 quests, suggesting dramatic cutbacks. We ended up playing through the story as it became available. We'd often take breaks from the main campaign to do Save the World's limited side events, most of which are designed to be played out of order while still remaining canonical to the overall plot. This occasionally leads to a bit of whiplash, as early interpretations of some characters differ greatly from how their portrayals end up later on. There was clearly a process of actors feeling out their voices as they went, leading to weird scenarios where a character like Lars sounds completely different in his first appearance.
I hear you all are in need of a storm analyst. Well, you're in luck. I saw that light show you put on back there, by the way. Righteous pyro. But I'm gonna do you one better.
Is that so?
Come see for yourself.
Compared to how he sounds in quests written a year or two later.
Hey, Crackshot? Any chance you're into trains?
Do you seriously think a train could be the holiday season's greatest toy?
Trains are great.
Trains are great.
Trains are, they're fine.
What games can you play with a train, Lars?
Here comes the train. Let's paint the train. Help the train be on time.
I'm docking home base an hour.
11 hours left!
Some characters, like the weapons specialist Clip, even change nationalities over the course of Save the World. Throughout the game, she has an awful, cartoonish accent that can't seem to decide between sounding British or Australian, until eventually it disappears altogether for her final appearance. One gets the impression that while the game's story did have a general direction it was moving towards, some of it got lost along the way. If you're concerned about story spoilers, this is your warning. It's difficult to get into my problems here without spoiling at least some of what is considered this game's ending. That being said, I do tread lightly on specifics, so these aren't super heavy spoilers. Still, be warned. The main story in Save the World is broken up into individual chapters based on one of the game's 4 biomes. You start in Stonewood with green forests and suburban homes. After establishing a basis on how to fight back against the Husk invasion, you move on to Plankerton, a northern zone dotted with lakeside campgrounds where it is eternally autumn. Once a new home base is established there, you move on to the sun-bleached deserts of Canny Valley, where a mining operation may have information on where the Husks came from and how to beat them. The Canny Valley campaign was added to Fortnite in August of 2018, with the presumption that the 4th and final campaign chapter, taking place in the hazardous mountain region of Twine Peaks, would signal the end of Save the World's early access period and the beginning of its free-to-play life. 2 years later, when Save the World finally did exit early access, Epic not only revealed it would remain a paid product forever, they also revealed that they would not be developing the Twine Peaks campaign. The main story of Fortnite, to them, was finished with Canny Valley, with future updates focusing on the smaller, easier-to-produce side story events that were unrelated to the overarching plot of stopping the Husks and saving the world. Before getting to that point myself, I had an understanding that Fortnite still had an ending. Canny Valley culminates in what could be described as Fortnite's final boss. The biggest, meanest monster of them all, the 300-foot-tall Storm King. I also knew that upon defeating the Storm King, Save the World had some kind of final send-off cutscene, an epilogue music video titled Stand and Fight, performed by the in-universe science team turned metal band Steel Wool. This music video celebrates many of Fortnite's characters, environments, and missions. Having seen both of these things now for myself, I can say that this is a half-truth at best. The fact of the matter is, Save the World makes it explicitly clear that things are not over yet. Despite defeating the Storm King, Homebase suffers losses that could be described as 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Even as the epilogue video finishes, it leaves you with this parting message: the fight continues. In the ramp-up to the end of Canny Valley, Save the World begins new plot threads that were clearly intended to continue forward into Twine Peaks. One of the home base heroes, Penny, starts to get homesick, only to discover that her sister Leanne is out there fighting the Husk hordes. Leanne, dressed in punk rocker attire, has changed her name to Power Chord and is cagey about why she left home. Both Penny and Power Chord are from London, and a different quest leading up to the end of Canny Valley suggests something bad might have happened that would prevent Penny from going home. Given the way Fortnite's story is presented, Power Chord seems as though she was intended to join your team. She is given both a hero name and a proper dialogue render, something that is generally only reserved for playable characters. The Power Chord skin also debuted in Fortnite's Battle Royale just a few months before the launch of the Canny Valley campaign, meaning she had a proper character model ready to go and everything. Given that she's only present in the dialogue for a single quest at the end of Canny, she was likely intended to be a larger player in the scrapped Twine Peaks campaign. That's just one plot thread of many left dangling in the wind. Dennis, Homebase's resident chef and a source of much of the game's best dialogue, continually makes greater and greater references to a girlfriend named Summer that we never get to see, even though a time travel related side story suggests he ultimately ends up with someone else. Canny Valley is also where Save the World begins touching on the origin of the Husks and the toxic, reality-warping storm they come from. When you start Save the World's campaign, the Husk invasion has already happened and there's no way to infer how long it's been going on. All you know is that you're being drafted into fighting back against the storm by building and expanding special storm-blocking shields that are powered by globs of a mysterious substance known as blue glow. The Canny campaign begins down the road of finally unraveling the story elements, but preparing to fight the incoming Storm King quickly takes precedent. And again, there's that epilogue video. Not only does it feature a number of characters that are barely present in the story up to that point, one of the final shots pulls out to show just how much of the world you've actually saved. A tiny bubble of safety on a planet completely choked by the evil storm, with a titanic, swirling hurricane vortex churning its way over an adjacent continent. It suggests that for however big and bad the Storm King was, there are even bigger and badder things yet to come. The fight continues. But Save the World was basically cancelled, not unlike a favorite TV show that never gets its final season. Now listen, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. Throughout this review, I've thrown around the figure of hundreds of hours of content. That's not an exaggeration. I played Save the World almost every night for over a year, with most sessions reaching nearly an hour if not more. Even getting to the Canny Valley chapter will take anyone a very, very, very long time. And just about every leg of every quest along the way has a voice component to it. Never let it be said that Fortnite Save the World was too short or did not have enough dialogue. There's a lot here, sometimes almost too much. And it's not as though I'll never hear from Ray or Dennis or anyone else at Homebase ever again. Since Save the World's exit from Early Access, Epic has released a small handful of short seasonal quest lines that revisit fan-favorite characters and bring notable benchwarmers out onto the field of battle for the first time. New content, however short or small, is still getting produced for Save the World. The game isn't dead yet, though if you consider that 2017 video, we're almost halfway through the 4th year of that 5-year proposal. But in a lot of ways, that just makes this hurt even more. It's not as though Epic ran out of money for Fortnite. There's a part of that game that generated multiple billions of dollars. And though the new holiday quests were fine, surely they could have combined all that same effort and finished the original story they started, right? Save the World was a very long, very messy journey both for me as a player and I assume for the development team as well. For some of them, Save the World represents a significant portion of their careers. So to back off and cancel the final closure can't be felt as anything less than a tragedy. I more than got my money's worth out of the gameplay, but emotionally, those dangling threads don't feel great and never will. They're still unfinished business, and it was deliberately made unfinishable. What does that mean for this review? Even if this was the most fun game in the world, it's not done. And if Epic has anything to say about it, it will never be done. We'll never learn the answers they teased in its penultimate chapter. And they'll continue to tease us by producing scraps of content that deliberately ignores those same mysteries. Save the World may have occasionally had a bit of narrative weirdness thanks to its hellish development, but it still went through the trouble of getting me invested in this world only to rebuke me at the end. That's not cool. It's a fair argument that video games are games, first and foremost. Fortnite might have many hours of voice dialogue, but I played it for 200 to 300 hours beyond that. To rely on tired food metaphors, gameplay might be the meat of the experience, but more often than not, narrative is the seasoning that makes it taste better. It takes a special cut of meat to stand on its own, and Save the World is not that kind of special. It's certainly fine for what it is, a tower defense game blended with a mobile phone RPG. But it's the characters and the voice acting that really provides the flavor. Obviously, I enjoyed the gameplay if I put this much time into it, but when I think of the moments of Save the World that I really love, it's always the dialogue.
I hate seeing him go, but I love watching him leave.
Okay, interesting.
Well, I mean, he was a nightmare, but it wasn't always this way.
Dennis, the expression, I hate to see you leave, but I love to watch you go, that's about butts.
No, it's not.
Very much so, yes it is, it's about butts.
Irrefutably, it's about butts.
Huh? Oh. Oh, no. Oh, I've been using it so much.
Yeah, you should stop.
The fact that Epic went out of their way to deny these characters, and by extension myself, any form of well-deserved closure after such a long road is almost unforgivable. I cannot, in any good conscience, recommend this game to anyone for as long as that stands. Final score, 2.5 out of 5. This has been a review of Fortnite Save the World for personal computer and PlayStation 4. It was written by and narrated by Ryan Bloom for Better Late Than Never video games. Visit BLTN.net for more reviews and whatever else I come up with to listen to. This is off the cuff here, folks. I'm not reading a script anymore. Go to BLTN.net and check out the stuff I've written. I don't post there very often, but I do post there as much as I can think to post there, as much as I have something interesting to put out. And make sure to check out my Patreon. Patreon donors get RSS feeds that subscribes them to all the podcasts that I put out, probably including this one. So, if you want to stay up to date on podcasts, if you want to get the latest audio readouts, the narrations, as it were, donate to my Patreon. That's the long and short of it. Patreon.com/BlazeHedgehog. This was an experiment. I don't know if I'm going to do too many of these. I just wanted to see, if there's interest, if it's fun to just put out, podcasts of this type. I've seen other sites do, like, for their longer articles, they'll have, versions where somebody will read it. And there'll be background music, and they'll put production effort into it and things like that. So I just wanted to see if that would work for my reviews. Like I said, BLTN.net for more of this. If I do more of these kind of readings of my longer articles, I'll try and come up with a less off the cuff ending. But until then,